Hi, I am Amy Welsh with Community Media, and today I'm with Ted Hurt, who is a Gettysburg licensed town guide. And today he's going to take me around Gettysburg and show me some things that are pretty exciting. So I'll let him tell us what we're going to be doing.
Thanks, Amy, for inviting me onto the program. Yes, I'm one of the 12 or so town guides here, and we do walking tours of the town. And today I'm going to take Amy to a few of the locations that we typically visit on our Black History Tour, which is ordinarily a 90-minute tour of important locations. We're going to give you sort of a selection of what we would do on a full-scale tour.
Thank you. I am excited to be a part of this. As most of you know, I am new here in Gettysburg, so having the opportunity to walk through the town and experience what it has to offer and the great history is going to be very exciting for me today. So are you ready to get going?
Yep, we can start and head outside.
It's a little cold, so we're going to bundle up and head on out. See you in a minute.
Hello again, this is Ted Hurt, and I'm standing on Chambersburg Street in downtown Gettysburg. I'm standing in front of a modern building, but at the time of the Civil War, this was the store of a prominent African American named Owen Robinson. Owen Robinson had a store, actually I will call it more appropriately a saloon. Basically he operated an oyster saloon, and the advertisements in the local paper said that he would sell oysters in the winter and ice cream in the summer. So he was a very popular and well-known businessman in town. Of interest to those who study local history is he claimed in a newspaper interview that he was born in 1790 in Carroll County, Maryland, as a slave, and his master freed him in 1817, a date that Mr. Robinson vividly remembered. He also recalled in his interview, when asked about his former master, he said that his master was half Methodist and full devil. But according to Mr. Robinson, his master must have gotten inspired by religion to free Mr. Robinson. And so Mr. Robinson lived as a freedman up in here in Gettysburg, and he died, according to his obituary, at the age of 110 years old. So a very prominent citizen. Another interesting cultural note is that when one reads the advertisement for his saloon, he indicates that there's a ladies' department and a men's department. So we have to imagine, if there were a store here, that the men would enter the so-called saloon by one entrance and the women would enter by another entrance. Mr. Robinson is buried in the local cemetery that was established for African Americans called the Sons of Goodwill, or Lincoln Cemetery, and I've seen his tombstone. Thank you. Right now we are standing in front of Christ Lutheran Church on Chambersburg Street. It's one of the oldest churches still functioning in the borough. Some of you may know that when General Lee invaded Pennsylvania in July 1863, there was great uncertainty and fear among the African American population as to whether the Confederates would capture them and enslave them and send them south. So that community tried to flee when news of the invasion came. We have an account by a young boy in town named Albertus McCreary. His family employed a servant named Old Liz, and he saw Old Liz being marched away by the Confederates as if she was going to be captured and taken south. One of the ironies is after the battle, Old Liz returns, and they ask, "Where were you?" Old Liz stated that she had hid in the cupola of this church during the battle. Now that's a story that some people think may be questionable, but that's what she explained as how she was able to reappear in Gettysburg and was not taken south.
We just ducked into a little coffee shop so I could hear more about the tour
Yes.
that you take people on.
So one of the important contexts for our tour, Black History Tour of the town of Gettysburg, is to know how the African American population lived here and how far back in time we can trace their ancestry. Basically, there were slaves in Adams County at its founding. But interestingly, in 1780, the Pennsylvania legislature enacted a law that was called the Gradual Emancipation of Slavery. Now, it was not immediate. It basically meant that if you were a slave in 1780, you remained a slave unless your master freed you. If you were born after that date, you would be an indentured servant for a period of about 28 years, again, unless your master freed you. But that did mean that over time in Pennsylvania, there become more and more freed African Americans than slaves. And so by the 1840s, a census would show that there are probably very few slaves left in Adams County. And when we think about the Civil War period, if you think the population of our county is probably about 2,400 individuals, probably about 200 of them are African Americans, and they all would be freed citizens at that point in time. But when we get to our next tour stop, I'm going to explain that the local community still lived in apprehension. Why is that? Because we're 8 miles north of the Mason-Dixon line, which divides the free state of Pennsylvania from the slave state of Maryland and the slave jurisdiction of Washington, D.C., and the lower states known as the South, which had slavery as a matter of law. So to sum it up before we get to our next stop, if you were an African American living in our town in the 1850s, you are very close to the slave-holding states, and there's danger, which we can describe very shortly. This is a photo of a woman named Mag Palm. She was a free person and a washwoman or servant who did household laundry for a family here in Gettysburg. She is posed after the Civil War in a local photographic gallery with her hands bound to replicate a bad experience she had in 1858 in our town. So what happened to Mag Palm? One evening in February 1858, she's coming home from work in the evening and she walks through an alleyway. All of a sudden, several men jump her, and basically they try to kidnap her and place her in a wagon that's waiting nearby. But Mag Palm, as shown in this picture, although they bind her hands, she's a very strong woman, and when they try to gag her because she's shouting, she claims in her later interview that she bit the thumb off of the slave catcher or kidnapper. Whatever she did, she was able to shout loudly enough that the local citizens came and basically threw away or threw out, if I can use that word, the kidnappers, who later were, we think, arrested for the kidnapping. The history after that gets very murky, but the good news is that Mag Palm was able to fight off her kidnappers. One point I want to mention is that we in Adams County are about 8 miles north of the Mason-Dixon line, which divided the free state of Pennsylvania from the slave-owning state of Maryland. And what you see in front of you is a newspaper advertisement from a Washington, D.C. newspaper in 1856. And the woman has placed an ad that says that her slave, Jim Johnson, has run away from her. And she is offering a reward to whoever will bring him back to her property in Maryland, Prince George's County. And she will pay $100 if Jim Johnson is returned from Maryland or the District of Columbia. But she will offer the, I'll call him a bounty hunter, $300 if Jim Johnson is found in Pennsylvania. Why is the higher amount offered? My guess would be that the time and effort to return a slave from the free state of Pennsylvania is going to be higher because anti-slavery sentiment is higher in Pennsylvania, which after all is a free state, and the towns in Pennsylvania do have an active African American population who are part of that community.